The recorders.
No, 6 for that. Yeah, Saturday.
Get started. Commissioner Thomas, Chairman Thomas, wrong meeting. I'd like to welcome everybody out to Planning Commission meeting for the North Ogden City Planning Commission, May 15th, 2024. We'll begin our meeting by invocation or a thought from Commissioner Webb. Follow Rich will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Vice Chairman Mason. Commissioner Webb.
Our Father in heaven, we're grateful to be here as a city. We're grateful for this nice facility and the opportunity that we have to sit here and listen to one another. And please help us that we'll be able to have good understanding and make progress. These things we say in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Please rise and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just waiting for somebody else to start talking. I guess it's still me, still you. All right, we'll make note that Commissioner Nancaro was excused tonight. Other commissioners are in attendance. Also to make note, our planning director, Scott, is joining us via Zoom. Consideration and action on approval of the May 1st, 2024 Planning Commission meeting minutes.
Commissioner Thomas, I reviewed those and I'm prepared to approve them. I have the most insignificant comment about them ever. In section 9, I'm only saying this to prove that I read them.
We know.
It said Commissioner Bailey added a suggestion for additional training on Robert's Rules of Order. I think I said that, not Commissioner Bailey. I don't see a reason to amend the amendments, but I just would like whoever records these minutes to know this is my voice, Commissioner Mason.
I second that.
All right. We have a motion and a second for approved corrected minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Do we have any ex parte communications or conflicts of interest tonight? If not, we'll open our meeting with the public comments. If anybody would like to comment on an item not on the agenda, we invite you to do so. Besides our applicant in attendance, or where's the thing on the Zoom that it shows me? Does it show who's, oh, you gotta,
Oh, we do have the participants.
yeah, if anybody would like to comment, you can do so at this time. We will have time in the items.
Sorry, it's used to open up a little pop-up window on the side, but
All right, and being that there's no comments, we will move on to subdivision ordinance 2023-10, consideration and action regarding an administrative application for preliminary plat approval of the Severing mixed use subdivision, 53 lots located at approximately 1651 North and 1659 North Washington Boulevard. Is Scott presenting online for this? Okay, Scott, we'll turn the time over to you.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for letting me participate by Zoom. I really appreciate it. So we have 2 administrative items today, neither of which will require a public hearing, and both of which are coming on the heels of the legislative application that was an annexation as well as a rezone or a zoning application to a mixed use zone that's manufacturing on the front for Class A storage units and multifamily residential on the back, the west side. And we've now reached the point where we have the administrative application component. So the first one we'll be considering is the subdivision. I do just want to start out by saying that on a reread of the development agreement specifies 50 residential lots and then the commercial and then the manufacturing commercial space out front. So right now there are 52, but given the side yard setback issues that we have on the site, my guess is that that's where those two lots are going to end up dropping off. So to just begin with, this would be consideration of, based on the development agreement, up to 50 residential units and then the manufacturing component. So I won't run through everything on the staff on the staff review here, but I do just want to talk about a few of the comments that we're going to ask Planning Commission to weigh in on. On page 3 of this particular application, John has it up on the screen there. The units are all rear-loaded 2-car garage with a driveway, with a 20-foot driveway. So all of the visitor parking is met on the driveways. The parking for the units themselves is actually met in the 2-car garage, but an item for the Planning Commission to weigh in on is this west side setback is 20 feet, and that's considered a front yard setback, even though based on the drawing, it looks like the back of the unit, but it's because of where the front door is. There is a section of our code, North Ogden Code 11-13-6C, permits the Planning Commission to reduce the front yard setback based on quality of design and pedestrian access. Each of these units has a walkway up to its front door. It has surrounding pedestrian walkways around the entire site, as well as their full brick units, front, rear, high level of design, high level of material. So staff's recommendation is that the Planning Commission can find that 20-foot front setback on the west to be accommodated based on the proposed design of the units. But that is something for the Planning Commission to weigh in on. And then there are a couple of other setback side yard issues on the site. Side yard setback for 2-story buildings and within the residential R4 zone is 20 feet. And my reading of the code, as well as the planned unit development code and attached dwelling units code, does not provide an administrative out or administrative change for side yard setback. So the side yard setback is 20 feet. That's been made a condition of approval. For the subdivision component on the manufacturing side, it's really simple. It's a single lot. There is the 10-foot sidewalk requirement out on Washington Boulevard that we've have done and applied consistently with all other subdivisions. And then the sidewalk along 1700 North, our city engineer and myself, we're still unclear exactly where the property line is in relation to the actual road right-of-way of 1700 North. So it's possible, given the survey of the property, that the applicant may need to shift that property line just slightly, which would be dedicating some land to the city to make sure that the curb and gutter, park strip, and sidewalk, as well as the 1-foot strip behind the sidewalk that we request, it all is within the road right-of-way of 1700 North and not on any private property. And since this is a greenfield development, starting out brand new, we believe that for that stretch along the frontage of 1700 North there that John is showing on the screen, you can kind of see the right-of-way narrows up there as it pinches along the north line following 1700. And we are just not totally sure where that sidewalk, park strip, and curb and gutter fall on that side. So that's it's a requirement that basically we think Planning Commission can approve the plat as it's drawn. It's a preliminary plat that we're dealing with right now, and all subsequent approvals, including site plan, would be contingent upon getting a final plat approved. And we can work through those minor improvement drawing items between preliminary and final because it won't change the nature of the subdivision plat itself. So on page 4 of the staff report, I'll just run through the recommended conditions of approval. Side yard setbacks for all residential units need to be 20 feet. 10-foot sidewalk needs to be added. The north property line of the subdivision along 1700 North may need to be adjusted in order to allow the sidewalk to be publicly accessible. We want the fence to not be built, the fence for the storage units not to be built in any of the right-of-way. Stormwater detention is coordinated among both portions of the property. So there's no stormwater collection or detention on the manufacturing side. It's all accommodated on the residential side, which is fine since they're the same owner today, but just need to, point out or make sure that we do accommodate all stormwater detention for the site in one or both of those locations. There is a landscape and buffer yard requirement in the code between manufacturing and residential. This can be addressed with a landscape plan. Will serve letters for Central Weaver Sewer and Pineview Water need to be provided. The signature blocks on the plat need to be adjusted, which is fine between preliminary and final plat. And then our standard requirements of the city engineer's letter, technical review committee, and fire marshal must be met. And with those conditions of approval, staff is recommending that the planning commission grant preliminary plat approval to the Severing mixed use subdivision, subject to those conditions in the staff report. And I'll now take any questions that you might have.
Scott, this is Commissioner Mason. I understand that Washington Boulevard is the street that's to the east, the eastern border of this, correct? And then what's the street that bisects, lots 136 and 137? Or 124, 125?
That is, I might get it wrong. I believe it's called 365 East, and it has been designed to line up with the road. There, 300 East. Thank you, John. It's 300 East. It's designed to align with Village at Prominence Point's private drive on the north side of 1700 North.
And essentially, Commission, that it helps with our block length standard to require basically connections through. So that road continues to the south, to the development in the south that we don't know it's going there yet, but it allows access.
So that's between lots 146 and 145, right? That's 300 East, I would think. There's another section over there that's, I could point it out if you
Yeah,
go to page,
let me
2.
pull this up.
yeah, there you go.
So 300 East is this road right
I
in
see.
this
Yeah,
area.
Okay,
These are just landscapes between the buildings.
right. That's just green grass.
And then the storage component is over here to the east.
Oh, and that's why that's so, okay, that's, I see that now.
Scott, you had mentioned you need verification if there's the right of way is wide enough for the property to have sidewalk and the park strip on the south side there.
On
If that-
yeah. Uh-huh.
If that's deemed that curb is on property line and there's needs to be 10 more feet, isn't that going to affect the setbacks on the townhomes as well?
It will, but if you see on that drawing that you're looking at right now, there's room to shift the townhomes to the south if needed. So they could pull that back to the south, and it won't need to be 10 feet. It's single digits number of feet because the existing right of way does have the back of curb, and I don't know if the back of curb right now is sitting on property line or not. It depends on where 1700 North was constructed, and that's the question. As we've looked in the field versus on the plans, we're not totally sure. So it's a conversation with their engineer. But the south side of those units, that's a little bit wider before the south side of the Severing property. That's where the detention is currently planned on the plans. So it would impact the depth and design of that storm detention if the units needed to shift south slightly.
Okay, another question about our ability to reduce a setback based on design qualities and pedestrian access. Is there any further clarification on that? I see the verbiage in the report, but that's all I have really.
Yeah, the verbiage in the report comes directly out of the ordinance. So I think this is one of those few items where we're not really legislating on site, but you are assisting the planning department in applying the zone or applying the code in this case. Given that the units are 360-degree architecture, they're brick all the way around. They're not doing like a material change on the sides or the rear of the units. They have architectural shingles. They've got standing seam, metal roof sections. I mean, they're very well done units that if you want to see one in person that looks pretty similar, Wall Avenue and Second South in Ogden has some similar kind of architecture units that are full brick units. And staff we think that the expense that the applicant is going to in the materials and also making sure that every front door has a walkway to it with a connected sidewalk with a cohesive landscape plan. does meet the intent of the ordinance as opposed to just doing like front architecture and front design, essentially.
So just to clarify, so the concept here is everything you just said in terms of the side that will face the road where the setback would be smaller. The idea here is that it will look less like an ugly side. So in other words, a more finished good, but it's going to essentially be the wall or the side of the
Well,
unit, correct?
If I heard you right, Scott, we can't change the side setback. It's only the front. that
It
we have.
is, yeah.
Sorry, yeah, it is the
So
front, but it's the
very west
side,
end of the.
but it's the side of the unit. Sorry, I did misspeak there. Is that correct? Side of the
No,
unit? That's
no,
the,
the-
It's not, no, if you're looking at the drawing right now that John has on the
Oh, okay.
These
screen.
ones down here.
Okay,
One-
thank
It's
you.
101 through 108, correct?
gotcha.
Uh-huh.
Thank you for that clarification. I see what you're saying now.
And each of those units then, like the units that face north would have a rear loaded garage. So you'd come into the project, you'd hit the private street, you'd park in the rear, and then you'd have a front door out on that north side. So along that whole northern portion between all those, as well as the western, that's where your front yard is at. And this is, it's kind of a hard ordinance to apply because the other two property lines that touch this are all unincorporated county. So we don't know exactly yet what they will be. They are in our annexation declaration. The current general plan allows for mixed use and multifamily. So we don't know what the surrounding property owners will come in as, whether that's multifamily or something else. So we kind of have to make a judgment call on whether we think this standalone meets the intent of the ordinance as it is.
And am I correct in understanding that in order that we need to reduce the number of units here by 2 units anyway to meet the development agreement?
That's my understanding, yep. Since the development agreement signed originally by the developer and the city says 50 residential units. But I think that those 2 units are gonna be what makes up the side yard setback difference. In that row of north and south facing homes, that's where you have the side yard setback issues. I can't quite see, it's like between.
137 and
30.
136 on each side of the 300.
And then, yeah, 137 and 124 is actually where the side yard reduction is at. That side on the east side of 137, east side of 124 does not meet the 20-foot side yard setback.
So in that hypothetical situation, they take away those 2 units, the front yard setback is still needed with this design.
Correct.
Then what about the other side though on 131? The side yard, if you could scroll just a little left, John. Oh, sorry, the other way. Yeah,
That one, I believe, yeah, that one might be an issue too, but we could probably shift the road a little bit west. If if they remove 2 units here, that's gonna give them 22 feet to work with, and then they can kind of rebalance and shift the site. That's one I had neglected to, in the development agreement, I remembered it after I went back, after I had written the staff report, that we had that in there as 50 units, but it's just, that's a comment that I had neglected to give back to their city engineer when we did the original review.
And Scott, they also, in theory, have the ability to move that property line between the storage and the townhomes as well.
They
in their-
do, they've got plenty of room over there, yep.
So,
They could shrink that drive aisle between building I and buildings F, G, and E. So they could shrink that aisle there and bring the site to the east a little bit.
and then Commissioner Eric Casperson had hoped to be here tonight, but had a family commitment, and so we did include his technical review memo, and it does have a long list of things that need to be addressed, before anything would really move forward.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I was just going to speak to that, and since you brought it up, since we've now changed our process that we only see preliminary and final as staff, but looking at his list of 45 items, there's only 1 item. Now, there may be some since he created this, but I only saw one item that is complete. And I was thinking that's an awfully lot to be pending where we won't ever see it again.
Yeah, and it's hard because state code has been clarified in the subdivision process that the preliminary component is now really zoning based. So what you're doing at preliminary plat is you're making sure that things like setbacks meet the ordinance, the total number of lots, the underlying lot sizes, that sort of thing are met. And then the improvement drawings, including all of the engineering, can be considered at final plat. And cities have a limited number of times of review that they can do, and they've got some review timeframes, and we've got real specifics around that. And last year it was unclear whether that improvement drawings, the engineering component of a review of subdivision, was done at preliminary or final, and that state code has cleared that up now. It says that you do essentially planning commission, planning level review, and then after that, the final plat goes into engineering, going back and forth between the engineer of the developer and the city to make sure that it meets all those other improvement drawing requirements. And some of those comments I've chatted with Eric were addressed in the improvement drawings, but for developers, it's a delicate balance of spending so much money on full improvement drawings and then having to redraw versus getting preliminary plat approved that entitles them to a certain number of lots and then move forward to the administrative process at the staff level. So I agree with you, Eric. I think that it's good to be sensitive to that, but not having the improvement drawings in this case will really change this overall layout and design and the way they've put the subdivision together. So we're pretty confident in bringing this to preliminary plat now. And this is also the third time staff has seen this plan set. So we've had several review comments back and forth with the applicant, Mr. Severing, and his engineer before the planning commission has seen this.
Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, our process now, I guess this is just brings up the comment. Our process now, what would move on. So I agree. I don't see a reason that we would hold it up from that. But with the new change in how preliminary is done, it begs the question if we want to readdress, does planning want to see final plat versus leave it to staff when it's now become less requirements at preliminary?
Yeah, and
So-
by state code, planning commission, unless we retitle you an administrative hearing board, there's some specifics. You can no longer see final plat. So state code, like final plats are administrative by state
Can you
code.
send that email out to the rest of the cities in the state?
Yes,
Let
I
them know
know
that.
Yeah,
I'm sure you'd love that.
Okay. Anything else, Scott?
no, nothing more on the subdivision.
All right. Before we go into discussion, would the applicant like to address us?
So, Terry Severing, developer, I guess. I have a picture of those units on wall.
Yeah, that was in the the ones on 7th Street or 2nd Street.
These are the ones down on second wall. Like I said, and I have my contractor here as well. So just to give you an idea.
And that's the back, that's the
This is the front.
front side.
This is what's gonna be
Okay.
facing 1700,
Gotcha.
okay? And then they'll also be facing, I think they're gonna be facing the other way too, aren't they? South. Yeah. Towards that. Hold on. As far as, yeah, I don't know that I really have, do we have any really major questions we wanna? I think everything else is going pretty good, so I appreciate you guys looking at this, and considering.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. As common practice, does any public like to comment on this item?
No raised hands.
All right, commissioners, discussion? Anything to discuss or amongst us or questions?
The only concerns is that that we don't have really listed anywhere other than verbal that So I think we would, any motion would need to include the limitation of 50 units. I don't see, if that's part of the development agreement, I feel strongly that that needs to stay. I do think there's an increased architectural design there, which I guess justifies the lack of a setback. In general terms, I hadn't really thought that, townhomes satisfied that. But I think, I was thinking more a development agreement was more of a mixed use and, where you get walkability, where you push things towards the sidewalk and stuff like that. So I really wanted a better definition of that, but I do think the city's getting they don't look like cut rate townhomes. So I do think we're getting something out of there, and I guess that justifies that. Given that broad definition, I don't love the way that's defined for us, but yeah. So those are my thoughts. If you're looking for a
So
motion,
are we okay based on that to accept a 20-foot front setback on lots 101 through 108? That's the only leeway we have. Side setback, again, we can't make adjustments to, but that's the only part where the front doesn't meet the 30 feet. They've got it drawn as 20. Based on practice with the city and what's being proposed that's being built, as long as it is built what is being proposed, I think it meets what we've approved in the past to reduce that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's gonna look nice.
Let me clarify just a couple of quick things. Do we want to say 50 units or do we want to specify 137 and 124? And if we eliminate,
I think 50 units is what the development agreement is.
okay,
They can adjust
they can adjust
how they want it to meet the side.
Now, does that give us our 20 feet on 103 to 108?
no, probably not.
101 through 108 now is already drawn at 20 feet.
I see.
So that the side setback is the issue on 300, proposed 300 east, 137 and 124.
Got it.
So they can't squish any further west to gain more space over there.
Yep.
They might be able to shift the property line between the two parcels a little bit east if they needed to or something like that, but.
Yeah, it just messes up the alignment of the road.
Yeah.
With across the street.
Yeah.
But
So I might understand correctly that if we give preliminary approval, assuming that no major overhaul is done, if it's a cut out a unit here or there and shift things here and there, that's okay to proceed to final. We'd only have to see it again if it was a complete redesign, changing a road,
yeah.
those kind of things, right?
And this is the only road that's part of the subdivision, that access and things to the storage units, that's site plan.
Yeah.
So.
And Commissioner Mason, to just further clarify that comment, it typically preliminary plats permit up to a certain number of lots. And we have seen them where they might reduce a lot where you had a frontage problem or something else. We don't typically bring those back to Planning Commission because it's just a total number, but say they were to redraw and figure out how to obtain additional lots, that's something we would review with the Planning Commission. But in this case, the development agreement specified the total number of residential units permitted for the site.
Yeah. The shape of this doesn't really lend itself to a lot of creativity for, placing units in different places. So the other concern was the number of pending items on the technical report. And so that would be something.
Sounds like, I think he answered that by way of, it's not in our
That's
purview
not our
anymore.
business.
So,
Well, and Eric, when I talked to him, I said, I'll stand in for him. And he said, there's not major concerns. They're all things that work out in the process, but it is unusual for us to improve it with this many, but they're things that are just, they're not going to get a building permit until these are done. So he didn't have any concern with that.
yeah, one of the big ones to me was the UDOT stuff, but that's really more relevant to the site plan of the storage units than subdivision approval. So that really isn't part of the subdivision side of it.
Okay, given us, if we want to have something to talk to, I'm prepared to make a motion. I move that we approve. What is this?
Subdivision 2020.
Subdivision 2020. I move that we approve the subdivision as written with the conditions in the staff report, with an approval for a reduction in the front setback as discussed. And a limit and an approval up to 50 units per the development agreement.
We need to address anything with the property on 1700, Scott, or is that in your staff report?
It's a condition of approval in the staff report.
Okay, okay. We have a motion,
Second that.
motion and a second. Any other discussion with it?
Generally we ask the applicant if he, how he feels about the conditions, and it sounded like he didn't object to it.
Oh, yeah, we didn't add any extra conditions on them, so.
Yeah.
Unless you want us to have the 30-foot setback in the front. Okay, thanks. Sorry, I didn't make sure you were okay with the staff report, but I guess you can. If you're okay with meeting the staff report, otherwise you can pull your application and correct it and resubmit. But if you're okay meeting all the requirements they've done, okay. Okay, Commissioner Mason,
Yes.
Commissioner Webb,
Yes.
Commissioner Bailey,
Yes.
Commissioner Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Watson,
Yes.
and I vote yes. All right, we'll move on to item number 6, site plan review 2024-7. Consideration and action regarding an administrative application for site plan approval for a mixed-use development, including Class A self-storage and multifamily townhomes located at approximately 1651 North, 1659, and 1659 North Washington Boulevard. Presenter is Scott. Scott, just in the future, as you're getting into this, when we have subdivision and a site plan that's commercial, we probably ought to have them as two separate items. Because we may have conditions with one, but not the other, or does that seem like
Yeah,
that would be appropriate?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was
Separate
gonna
site
point
plans.
out, that this is it's a long staff report, and then the conditions of approval at the end are broken into 3 kind of areas. One that is conditions for both sections, and then there's a condition section for the multifamily townhomes and the manufacturing. So yep, I would agree with you, and I was already so far down the road of writing the staff report that I didn't go back and duplicate, but that's very good feedback. I really appreciate it. This staff report really is 2 separate site plan reviews that have been combined into one. So for everybody that read all of those code sections, thank you for hanging on and going through it and reading all of the staff comments. To just jump down through it again, this is an administrative item. Administrative items are approved if they can meet all of the sections of the code. We really don't have a whole lot in here that the planning commission needs to weigh in on. There's a few items that are going to be required based on the development agreement, and it largely complies with our requirements within our code as well as the development agreement. But I'll run through the recommended conditions of approval is probably the easiest way to do this, because so many of them, as you read down through, is just that the standard had been met. And that's based on the comments that had been back and forth between the applicant and the city. So first condition of approval is that approval of the site plan is subject to approval of the preliminary and final subdivision plat. You've just approved a preliminary subdivision plat, but getting to final subdivision plat will be required. And just for the applicant's sake, since I'm not in the room, that is its own application, its own fee, everything to move it to final plat. So we can talk about that now after this meeting, after the notice of decision they'll receive. They'll need to meet the requirements of the engineer's report, the technical review committee, and the fire marshal. So those are the comments that are for the site plan for both sections. And now the site plan approval conditions for multifamily townhomes. 1, the 20-foot setback on the west side of the townhomes is being recommended by staff. It's a condition the planning commission needs to consider for approval, which has now been approved by the subdivision. So this was a duplicate item of approval. We just want to be sure we're being consistent. All side yard setbacks must be 20-foot minimum. In the development agreement, as well as in our multifamily code, it states that a playground of sufficient quality and design be in there to meet the ordinance. Staff recommends this be delegated to staff for approval unless the planning commission feels strongly that you want to see what the playground equipment that they'll provide is. The applicant must submit a landscape plan at the time of building permit with final sign off happening at certificate of occupancy. The city doesn't do any landscape plan reviews of single-family subdivisions, but for multifamily, commercial, and manufacturing, we do review those. And we'll go out and actually check the box on all of those landscape plans at certificate of occupancy and make sure they are installed. If it comes down to a weather issue, the applicant can bond for the cost of the improvements. You know, say it comes to November or something, they don't want to plant turf grass. They can bond for the cost of those improvements, obtain certificate of occupancy, and we typically give them 6 months to get those improvements in. Location and design of light poles to be submitted for prior approval before the issuance of the first building permit. This is an issue that we have had where we begin issuing building permits and we don't have assurance on where our streetlights are going. We want to just make sure that that's addressed up front, and that is in Eric's engineering letter. And with that, Eric, based on your comments, I'll stop and see if there's any questions on site plan review for the multifamily before I go on and do site plan review items for the storage units.
Do we have any indication as to where the playground would be located? I didn't see any like planning for that in the given materials.
No, it's probably going to end up on that south side. There's two detention ponds that are in the improvement drawings on the south side of those units. That's the practical place to put a little piece of playground equipment. It's just going to depend on where there's the detention on the west, which will be a depression. So you're going to be probably in that eastern component there, where there will be a flat space and landscaped. Detention basins can either be fully grassed if their homeowners association wants to mow that, or they can be rock lined in the bottom. So they vary across the city greatly, but they'll need to put some sort of, playground type of equipment out there that we'll review.
And given that this is really one site plan for both the commercial and the residential, is there a legal possibility that playground could be up against Washington? I don't think the applicant would even want it there, but there's no profitability there. But I mean, is that technically possible?
No, because it's really tied into the multifamily unit. So I think just by the way the development agreement is established, we would do that. But I think that's a good comment to say that a playground of sufficient quality and design must, within the multifamily area must be added. And then if you want to delegate that to staff to review, be great.
Any other questions or comments for this multifamily portion? I think we addressed the setback things and the concerns there in the plat. So we don't need to readdress those for site plan, correct?
Correct.
Let's talk about the other side.
Okay, so on the manufacturing storage units, the development agreement really drove the approval of this with city council through the legislative process. So the development agreement must be adhered to regarding design and materials of the storage building. And that's kind of as far as we went. That's that front key storage building. There's an image in the staff report of what that would look like. That image was duplicated in the development agreement. And then the rest of the Class A storage buildings, we looked at the design standards, the materials, the wall articulation, all of that. And the applicant really has done a great job of making sure that they've complied with all of those wall articulations, especially given that you have two unknown new neighbors, one to the west and one to the south for this property that we really don't know what's going to end up there. So I wanted to thank them for doing that and helping adhere to the design standards. We do have a code that lighting in the storage units needs to meet dark sky requirements. That's 50% cutoff fixtures that point downward only. That typically goes against having just like a bright spotlight facing off of the storage units. And these are going to be controlled units that will be not accessible after a certain time of night. So we do have some lighting requirements. The stormwater detention being coordinated among both portions. Again, that's like maybe it's belt and suspenders or duplication, but we do just want to make sure that it's very clear that we're collecting that storm detention for all of this impervious surface on the manufacturing side somewhere. Staff recommends an 8-foot tall fence surround the storage unit project, as well as meet the buffer yard landscape requirement between manufacturing and residential areas. submitting a landscape plan at the time of the building permit, which meets the landscape design. For this side specifically, that would be that buffer yard on the west side of the storage unit between that property line and the residential line. That's the buffer area, and it requires a screening, plantings, trees of such a very specific spacing. And then staff recommends as a condition of approval that the applicant provide approval from UDOT in writing, their recommendations for driveway access, cross-access agreements, and any other specifics related to Washington Boulevard. It would be helpful, I think, if the Planning Commission wanted to weigh in on this. All of these individual sites along Washington Boulevard from 1700 North to 1500 North through the city's annexation declaration area all have miniature driveways. In fact, this site had 2 driveways, and UDOT really didn't want to continue either of them. And that's why the site is only accessible off of 1700 North. And this would be the time if Planning Commission wanted to require on the south side of that parking lot a cross-access easement, that it may be worthwhile to do so to make sure that we don't cut the southern neighbors off from access to 1700 North. You know, we can have the applicant weigh in on that as well, but I participated in the meeting with UDOT, and I just want to get David Alger or UDOT Region 1's follow-up in writing that they're okay with this design and approval of it, even though there's no access onto Washington Boulevard specifically. So with that, staff is recommending approval of the mixed-use site plans, including the storage site with the development agreement and the townhome project, subject to the conditions in the staff report with those comments from Planning Commission and meeting the TRC letter, fire comments, and engineers review comments. And I'll take any questions.
Could you clarify what you meant about the access to the south? I see 300 East as.
Yeah, if you look at the parking lot on the, John, if you can highlight like the parking lot on the east side of the main storage building right there. So as you come south, right now that is held back 10 feet from the southern property line, right there. So we could require a cross-access easement there to go south, that in the future, should, say, the next developer to the south not be granted any access from Washington Boulevard, that this parking lot be the connecting point. And that's, it's kind of it can be a sensitive issue because I don't want to impact Mr. Severing's project with many, many more cars that are going to come across his parking lot and doesn't have like a maintenance agreement with somebody. But I also don't want to cut off development to the south if UDOT comes in and says that they're going to require it to come from 1700 North. So now is the time essentially to obtain that cross-access easement if the Planning Commission desires that, or the time to recommend it.
So when we did Prominence Point, I know you weren't here, Scott, but John, if you will maybe remember, the reason why that road, if you look at the road to the north, that goes north and south, I think that is that 385? It comes south through Prominence Point and then had to jog to the west. It curves to the west and then ties into the point of 1700 where it does, because of a requirement to stay so far away from the intersection from UDOT. So if I'm remembering right, I don't know if you remember that, John, but because if you look at their site, the road was straight through where the car wash is, and then as it gets to the south, it jogs west. And I thought it was to meet some kind of distance from the intersection that was being required by UDOT for stacking or whatever in cars. That would be my concern with the access here as well. But
The only other thought was maybe it might have got pushed west when they wanted to put a gas station there. Because UDOT wouldn't let them put a gas station and they needed that for turnaround for the truck. But I think you're right. It is a little weird that UDOT's letting it be 50 feet from the intersection, but the UDOT changes all the time.
Yeah.
So there's another option to line it up with that, where that road is.
well,
I mean, that's not what's presented here.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, from us as saying, hey, where's this access? I don't know how much control we have saying where the access is, but I brought that up seeing.
Yeah, that's
if
a good point.
UDOT, But.
I think it's smart to have UDOT take a look at that, get it in writing,
Let's-
you know.
You want to come up? Yes, Mr. Evering.
Or they've looked at it.
Because I brought that, when my engineer actually had originally designed that, he actually had it closer to Washington. And I told him, I said, I don't think they're gonna allow this to do this. UDOT's gonna, because of the same thing. He got a hold of UDOT and they said, we don't care. We don't care how far back it is. And so he put it there. If you want me to move it further to the west, I don't have a problem. I do have a problem you letting people burn up my asphalt going through it. Like, having passage through there. I just don't think that should be. I mean, I'm not trying to throw a kink in the wrench, but I think you'd agree with me if it was your place and you got to maintain that asphalt. You get drive through there constantly and that's wear and tear on my property. I don't think.
From a
I should-
design specs aspect, I don't like it either. I don't like when I walk through these mega parking lots and
Yeah,
one turns into another. I don't like it.
yeah.
Although we can't, I don't think, make a situation where we landlock the development to the south. And
Well,
so-
see, I actually tried to get an easement off of, because I've actually got 3 driveways along there, because I've got the property to the south of the 1651. I actually have 2 entries on there and then one more entry on 1659 North. And I tried to get UDOT, when I first contacted UDOT about putting in a out right there. And I told him I want to take all 3 of them combined. The guy was like, are you kidding me? We've never had anybody want to take 3 to 1. I'm all for that. But then when we had our meeting, then they were like, well, we don't really want to grant you access, which Sean and I discussed it later. And I thought with my storage, I really don't see a lot of heavy traffic, coming in and out of there. And so we felt there's no sense of putting it on there. But now I'm just a little concerned about making mine a pathway coming through there. If we can avoid that, I would, I
Well,
agree with you,
the
but
trouble with it is,
I don't.
the
see-
next access point to
there
the
should be
south.
Plenty of room further south, because UDOT don't want them right by the corner. So further south they go, and Jim Hill's got 1, 2, 3 down his place as well. So I don't see why, I don't see it, I don't see that as a
is there part,
landlocking anybody in.
I know he owns the south view. Does he go all the way back to where your road through the townhome stubs into? So,
Yeah, and they're already.
so they
talking-
own
the
contiguous
developer
from
he's working with is
Washington
already
all the way
talking about
back to
tying
that.
into- To that street to come back. Plus, they've got another access further west on that. I think it's 100, where it's kind of stubbed in right now. They've got access there to come in as well from the north. But I
Okay.
think they could, honestly, they could shift further south to pick up coming onto Washington, which would be further away from the corner, which would be better in my opinion, than allowing them to use my roadway as a thoroughfare or my parking for a thoroughfare. But yeah, as far as moving, if you need me to move that,
My concern where the access is really relative to the light and the turn lane there that
yeah. and I
maybe,
would-
but I agree, your use is not a high come and go
Right.
traffic use, so it's not as a,
Right.
but
But if
Because when I originally-
you shifted your entrance west,
It
just
does-
the entrance, it doesn't really make much of a,
It's not gonna really
it doesn't
affect me.
affect you almost
Right.
at
I
all.
if it doesn't affect you and you're willing to it, it's probably better for everybody to have it further away from the light.
Yeah,
Car stacking, it'll be easier for people to get out, like.
right. Because there is times that's pretty, 1700 is pretty busy.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, I really don't have a problem. In fact, I tried to get Craig, when he was designing this, I told him, I tried to get him to bring it back further to line it up almost with that other road. But then the way the storage unit's laid out, I can see why he did what he did. But I don't see any reason.
But
why
even
we
just
can't
close,
bring
even
that.
just closer to the one long building would probably
Yeah.
be better for you.
Yeah,
anyway.
It's
do
less
you see
likely
a
to be a
problem with bringing
thoroughfare
that
if it's
road
not
further,
traffic.
closer to the west?
Truth.
Shot through.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think if you did that, you'd protect yourself from any cross-access agreement, because
Yeah.
they're zipping through.
The only problem is if you move further west, they're gonna have to come in, try to circle around
That's true.
to get their trailers and everything, to get to the keypad to go into the units. That's gonna be the problem.
Hmm,
If you see what I'm saying.
well,
Your gate would be
Yeah,
between the buildings right there.
Yeah, I see
Yeah.
what
So
Sean's
if you
saying.
come right in against the building. the
Yeah.
gate's right There, that's gonna be, that's just.
Yeah, so maybe not right against the building, but even if you went,
Even if you split.
Another
the
40
difference,
feet
there you
back.
go.
like if the west edge of your approach hit that box that's drawn on there, right
I'm not sure
there,
what that
yeah,
box is.
like that would be, you know,
Maybe you split the.
enough
difference
that
between the middle,
gets
that's
it
probably
around.
where-
I mean, it
Yeah.
wouldn't be hard to look
But
at.
we'll
like
work
this
it.
truck. and
I just look at, I think it's a reasonable
easy.
look at this stage in the game. I think it's reasonable to see what you know, with a diagram of, you know, a trailer turnaround or whatever, what you think you can get by shifting it west. I think honestly is probably in your best interest. You know, we're talking about it from a city standpoint, but
Right.
you know, it's probably better for everybody, including you. So.
The-
In terms of the cross access agreement and landlocking that property, is the street dividing the townhome development? Is that not providing access to that property to the south?
It will, yes, that's the city.
So
may
when we're
require me to
discussing
put that in.
landlocked, we're talking another access off of Washington,
Right.
right? So it's not going to be landlocked, but we're reducing maybe the southerly neighbors' frontage access to Washington Boulevard.
Yeah,
without
I'll
a
save this for when we
cross-access
get into
agreement.
our discussion,
was.
but, I do think that still landlocks. I mean, it's Mr. Severin's floor, so I'll let him sit down when he's
Yeah,
done, but,
sorry.
and we'll, so you really have the floor, so.
No, I
Oh.
think I've covered it, unless you have any other questions for me.
No, I just didn't want to cut you off and get into a discussion, and then we get in this back and forth, so I just invite you to make your comments, and if we address you, then you can come back up, so, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Robert's rules, man.
Yeah, Good job.
So.
It'd be Mason's rules before long.
Well.
So
well,
discussion on, we've pretty much satisfied the site plan for this mixed use, the subdivision, I mean, the multifamily subdivision site plan approval on the, what I guess you would consider the manufacturing / commercial side of this for the storage units.
Okay, so,
Information, yeah.
okay, my general comments on this are, I do think I know it's not gonna happen, but I think we're protecting ourselves to just say, let's keep the playground in the residentials. I think, is that, I mean, that's an
Yeah,
easy thing, and
We discussed
can't
that, yeah,
imagine-
we've
I
discussed.
can't
it.
imagine the applicant would object to anything like that. Keeping the playground in the residential section, we just put some, yeah, okay, all right. That'll make me feel better that we're not putting the playground on Washington, thanks. So I knew we weren't gonna do anyway, all right. My thought on landlocking is it landlocking? No, because somebody can access from further west, like we've talked about, and then they could have a road come in. But what are we trying to attract on Washington Boulevard? What types of business generally want to build on Washington Boulevard? They want access from Washington Boulevard. And so I think are we landlocking it? No, but are we creating a situation?
Agreed, because it almost feels like you'd have to have more multifamily housing perhaps with access from the back end, right? But anything else would feel
I'm
like
just
it would
thinking-
be challenging to build there.
a
Without
Del
Washington.
Taco or
Yeah,
somebody wants to come in,
right.
right? And build there. They're going to want you to turn off of Washington. And if UDOT says no,
You have to have
Then-
quick entrance.
then I think they confront it and there isn't going to be a visible path into their business, right? Because it goes out and around the storage units and the residential. You have to come all the way back in through the residential. Now, I'm going to speak out of both sides of my mouth because I hate I hate cutting through one parking lot to get to somebody. I hate that design. I think that's bad design.
Does it feel like
Can
we're like
we shift to
missing-
sheet C001 just so everyone can, that shows the southerly properties? And there is going, you know, if you would look at that exhibit, there is going to be a landlocked property. There's a longer sliver to the west that it should satisfy. But yeah, page 18, sheet C001, if we can pull that up, it might be a good guide for this discussion.
Page 18.
Yeah, page 18, the sheet number on the bottom right is C001.
And as we're discussing this, I feel like we're missing the UDOT information of what they really will or won't approve. That makes it difficult to do what we're, forward thinking planning, which we're tasked with.
It's typically 500 feet.
So if you're talking at the table, that microphone is live and people on Zoom are hearing it, just so you
Don't
know.
call us any names.
But I think if we zoom in just to the south of the project site, the southeast part, that would be the parcel in which it would be more or less landlocked.
So
The long parcel would still be accessible from the new road through the
I mean,
townhomes.
it's not technically landlocked in that you can get there from the west, right?
Well, it's a different parcel, so the
Yeah.
parcel.
Oh,
would
it
require
is.
the
Yeah.
parcel to the
Oh, you're
west.
right. Yeah. It is landlocked.
I just not the scale. I mean, I think 500 feet UDOT will give you another
1661
access.
is landlocked. Yeah. Good
Oh.
catch.
So there is 500 feet there where,
I don't know, 1661 in essence is going to be relying on the
So if
quick wins
1661
of this- of
develops
the
into a
Severance
small
development.
boutique,
Well,
But it is
but
the
they,
same
but they
owner
have,
as-
yeah, you have the same number on the two, even though there's the 1661 twice there.
It's still the Hill family's property, both parcels.
Okay.
But,
there are two parcels,
The same owner.
so that,
meaning they could sell separately.
if they do, then
Yes, that's
Then that's
leaving it
their
up to them,
problem.
right?
bad on their due diligence
that's
about
on
it.
Kind of where I
That's
stand.
their
If
problem.
it's the same, if it's the same people, yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm
I think
I'm
worst
fine
case
to not
scenario,
require, in my opinion, not to require the cross access, but however, I would uphold that if UDOT requests it and wants it, then it would be fine as well. I know sometimes it's mainly for a secondary access if but again, I don't think it's gonna be addressed until the people to the south want to develop, and then they'll say, go talk to these guys and get a cross access
Yeah.
and we'll let you, and so I don't want to put the burden on severing. I mean, I've already gone the rounds on this project and my whole thoughts about how this would block development to the south. But city council said, no, we're okay with it. So I'm going to honor what the code says and
Yeah.
we're going to block the south. We're going to block the south. So
Yeah, I think getting something from UDOT in writing seems important.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that if they said, we don't care how, on your access, how close it was to the light, but again, the staff is, it's being required to get the okay and buy off from them. You do that part, then I don't know what else. I mean, from our standpoint, pushing it further west, like you've agreed to do, is what I feel like we can ask and do. Anything beyond that to line it up with the other road that they made Prominence Point stay back that far. And maybe it's because it's a road rather than a driveway or an access to the business. But
I think for the southerly property, I agree. I wouldn't want to impose a cross access agreement, but I think that if that were to turn into a boutique or something, that UDOT would probably impose a right turn only out of that southerly property. And then a no left turn back out onto Washington. They would block that with an island,
It'd
kind of
look
like
a
what
lot like
happens
all
down
of
by
Flutter
Smith's.
does right now.
So I think there's still reasonable hope that there would be access to the southerly. It would just be between them and UDOT or them and the Severings at a later date. But I think just seeing the properties that they could sell them as separate, even though it's one owner, does influence the decision. But anyway, I don't think I agree with imposing an access on the applicant.
So.
Unless
can you
required by
guys-
UDOT. Are we in agreement with that?
In agreement with what?
Unless required by UDOT that there's an access to the south.
I don't think
guess-
UDOT has any say on his parking lot once it's in. It's not a UDOT road.
You're right.
My,
it's just what they're gonna say over there on the.
I guess my question is, and just in terms of trying to balance planning versus of course, property owner rights, which is what we're always doing. It seems like if several of you kind of felt like having a right of access in this parking lot is very punitive, but potentially to the property owner. Can we explain that a little bit more? Because to me, and maybe I'm mistaken here, it seems like such an easy thing to connect that. And I understand that it's more traffic, but maybe just it just seems like it's so much better for future planning, those other properties and even potentially the current property. But you guys just maybe articulate that. It
It
because
would
it
leave,
sounds like
it
you're
would
saying it's
leave
a
all
big
of the
request.
maintenance and all of the, I guess, liability on the current applicant. We're granting access to a property owner that didn't want to come here for their public comment.
Right.
And we're protecting that, and it would be him that has to maintain the asphalt, him that has to keep that parking lot
Yeah.
plowed, him that has to make sure that there's a painted zebra crossing from the east side of his parking to the west. I mean, you
Right.
can go down the
It's-
line.
I mean, in terms of snow removal, et cetera, it's the same parking lot, right? Because if I'm looking at this map correctly, we're just talking about having that connection piece.
But he
And,
doesn't have to remove the snow right now if he doesn't want to. He could
oh, I
have there
see
be
what
no
you're saying.
parking, or he
Okay,
could be
because once it's
late.
connected,
And then
Okay.
in the future, if someone can't get through his parking lot because his snow removal company was late, I mean, I'm just giving a
yeah,
hypothetical.
no, that helps. Because like the difference between a parking lot scenario versus, so what it's doing, it's turning it into a road essentially is what you're saying.
A private road
Okay.
that he would have to.
Gotcha.
I can think of some
Just-
other hypotheticals. that could
Yeah,
be.
just trying to get on the same wavelength.
Neighbor
as what
wants
you're
to get a
thinking here.
concrete truck to their property, right? And they don't, they're not, instead of going right over the curb on Washington, they'd go right through.
So, like,
It's
on-
access that's made and
Yeah, yeah,
crack,
yeah,
crack,
yeah.
crack, and yeah.
Especially if the applicant moves it to the west, it creates even a little bit more issue, the straight drive through the parking lot isn't there. But if the southerly neighbors aren't here for their comments, I have a hard time guessing
see.
what their desires would be
I
anyway.
think Nessa too, it's a philosophical argument that is between communal elements
Mhm.
and individual property right. elements.
Exactly.
I mean, when you have that, then all of a sudden there's a communal element. And
Mhm.
it cuts both ways. There's pros and cons, but I think that's at the core.
Because the
Yeah, it's
southerly
just- it's
neighbor
gonna
could have
get-
already been engaged in discussions with UDOT and already protected themselves and said, hey, 500 feet from that turn onto 1700 north, can I have an access in the future? Yes.
Okay, yeah, it
We
just,
just don't have enough information,
it's
I don't think.
probably not ideal for the future, but I mean, I think your points stand that perhaps it's not reasonable to ask the applicant to take that on, so. Okay,
If the other property owners were here and they were worried about it, I think it could push the conversation further. but-
I'm not so concerned that they're here. If it were a bigger, broader parking lot, I think I would be more,
true.
given that it's this little thing, having an access through there. So I mean,
It was really the decision, going back to Chairman Thomas, it's the decision of putting this here in the first place that kind of got the
righto.
ball rolling.
Yep,
on
yeah,
this.
I agree. I
Yeah,
agree with that.
okay, I'm with you guys. I get it.
Manufacturing, we
Yeah.
chopped our left arm
And-
off,
and-
so.
And yeah, just as a reminder, when an administrative action, we have much less
Yep.
leeway on things,
Yep.
right? Like it's
So
black and white. Does it
the
fit
one leeway piece because it sounds like we're just pushing that driveway entrance a little bit over. We're meeting in the middle.
Yeah.
in
And I
terms of
think the
that.
property owner sees that it's positive
Would
for
be
him
helpful for them as well.
in reducing the asphalt maintenance by shifting that thing 10 or 15 feet. Because when people don't see a straight shot, they don't drive through as often.
Yeah, that's true. Any other discussion? I like the look of your design. I know I've been a proponent of against this, as you know, but you have done a nice design. For kudos to you for getting the city council to let you to do this here.
Yeah, I actually think it's gonna look
So,
nice.
Yeah, it's a good fit.
Yeah.
And thank you for, putting the quality materials in. We do appreciate that.
And I think, Eric, I appreciate your foresight for the city in saying like, hey, what impact does this have? Again, that communal element versus the individual property right element, which is a really hard thing to do. I think that you're designing something that you feel like adds to the community, something that looks a little nicer that you have pride in, which is great.
I think Brandon for that, because he's the one to give me the idea.
Hey,
ooh, hey.
Speaking of blind squirrel.
He told me we didn't want a storage unit on Washington Boulevard, but he wanted a gateway building. That's what I found.
There you go.
very good.
Yeah, I'm taking royalties. I'm not taking royalties, whoever's listening to this. I'm not.
Even a blind.
How many times did he say crown jewel?
Crown Jewel is Mountain Road, man. It's a.
Oh,
blank
that's
canvas.
the crown
We'll talk about
jewel.
that later.
Oh.
Singular.
It's,
Something
it's,
different.
it's a moving target.
All right, any other discussion on this?
No, we need to.
So we do have, it's the site plan review. Being that they're combined in the motion, just mention that the residential site plan and the 1651, I guess they're being defined differently as, well, no. Self-storage and multifamily townhome site, so. The only condition with the self-storage that we really addressed is moving the driveway further west. He'll be required to meet the landscaping and detention as per code. So is there anything outside being that's in manufacturing, Scott, that we need to make sure we address that's not gonna, that possibly wouldn't come up in a plan check or review?
No, the manufacturing zone's very open, so the buffer yard requirement between residential and manufacturing is probably the key component there. And then when you have the Class A storage, you have its own set of standards you have to follow in going through that. So otherwise, it's almost like zero lot line development, tall buildings right on property line. It's extremely open, so there's nothing else that we really need to address in this case.
But being that the two different uses are ordinance that requires 8-foot fence between residential and manufacturing or commercial applies, even though it's the same site plan being approved, correct?
It does, yep.
Okay. If there's no more discussion, I'd entertain a motion.
I'll give it an attempt. I move that we approve the 2024/07, let's see, site plan approval for the Class A self-storage and Class A self-storage with the conditions listed in the staff report, in addition to moving the parking lot entrance to the west as discussed, and approve the multifamily townhomes with the conditions listed in the staff report, along with the playground being located in the multifamily area. Is that the end of this? Have I arrived? That was a tricky one.
I would second
We
that.
need to, okay.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All right, Commissioner Webb,
Yes.
Commissioner Bailey,
Yes.
Commissioner Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Watson,
Yes.
Commissioner Mason.
Yes.
And I vote yes. All right, thank you. We'll move on to public comments. If anybody would like to address us, please raise your hand in the chat. Or if the public that are with us would like to address us, you're welcome to do so.
Just for my clarification on the buffer zone between the townhomes and the storage units, you're talking about a fence?
So between uses, the ordinance requires an 8-foot solid fence between a residential and a commercial or manufacturing
Can
zone.
that be my back wall?
So yes, the building can
Okay.
be a fence.
Because I think putting a,
I
Yeah.
was gonna ask, but I can't see that side of the site plan on the screen, so I didn't.
yeah, I'm planning
but-
that wall going all the way around.
Yeah,
There's your fence.
it just, yeah, so
Okay.
wherever,
Just wanted to clarify that, thinking I've got to put a buffer in between there, and then what's that gonna be? That's just gonna be a
No.
garbage collection back there.
no, just has to be between there. I just wanted to
Okay,
make sure that was, because you're a same site plan, so make sure that applies.
okay.
So,
And the buffer yard, just sorry to interject really quick, the buffer yard is more of the landscape planting than anything else. So if you intend your building to be the fence, that works just fine. Terry, you and I can talk through the requirements on the buffer yard as far as tree spacing, and there's some planting requirements there that would happen between the west side of your building. I can't see which building it is, but that storage building and the beginning of the townhomes.
Okay, okay. Perfect. Thanks, Scott.
there's no more public comments. We will, remarks from commissioners. Anything tonight?
So I know I'm kind of a jerk sometimes, but I do feel strongly that, that we stick to our procedures, which is having an applicant address us, and not that this was going to get hostile, because Mr. Severn's been here and it's always been cordial and everything, but the potential's there if we engage in a lot of back and forth, right? So as much as we can, I appreciate having this is just my opinion also. So we're a body and we can behave however we want, but if we stick to our procedures of having them address us and then saving our deliberation for when they then sit down, I think it can avoid a sticky situation, which wasn't going to happen here tonight, but has in the past, right? We've had some ugly meetings. And so that's why I was asking you to kind of like say your piece and kind of go away. Not that I didn't trust you, but just, I was just trying to, but really get out of here.
Those are Mason rules?
So anyway, that's Brandon's opinion.
Masons.
That's Commissioner Mason's opinion,
I think it's vice chair.
so, anyway.
Okay,
I
thank you.
think some trainings on Robert's rules and
Mhm.
some discussion amongst us.
So we norm. Mhm.
Yeah, so yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, is good. And I do think that there's some benefit at times of formality, but there's
Yeah,
also some benefit.
I
of
agree with that.
People like being able to like get the emotion out. This is a safe place that people should feel they can come and be heard. And sometimes when they're stifled, it can create other unintended problems.
We've historically had a very informal
For sure.
format, and I think most people appreciate that. Some of that format can protect us in the future, so I'm just
Yep.
pointing that out.
Yep, great point.
All right, anything from Scott,
Nope.
Ryan?
Nope.
John?
Two things of note. The council approved a new police chief last night. So Chief Quinney's retiring. The chief that was selected his name's Brian Einen. He's been a captain in Ogden for several years and been with their agency for 20 years or something like that. So he lives here in the city and we're excited to welcome him.
He lives in North Ogden?
Mhm.
Oh, cool.
That's great.
And then the other thing is the council also
You better.
the council also passed a new a rule for commercial parking for semis, and basically they're not allowed to park for more than 4 hours on a street.
Nice.
So if you've seen concerns, it was always prohibited in residential areas, but this
Does that
is now-
arise from Alberta Drive by chance?
no, it
Wow.
came from 300 East over by O'Reilly's. People were coming around the corner
Oh.
and a truck was sometimes in the travel lane.
Yep.
So that was, I think that raised the concern, and so this will help the police with that. And other than that, things are fun. It's budget season. If you want to provide any feedback on budget, the council's willing to listen. So
When is the?
the hearing will be on the 12th, or sorry, the 11th of June. The
Just
budget
give John whatever he wants.
No, that's a dangerous thing sometimes. I want a 3-year vacation and a 50-foot yacht, so.
And we're putting that in the budget?
Yeah.
We don't wanna lose
No,
it, John.
yeah.
Is there any discussion of returning our flower baskets by chance?
Not this
Heard.
year. Budget is
Well-
pretty tight. The council has been moving towards,
Have we considered a GoFundMe for the North Ogden flower basket?
we have considered
Like
trying to do
residential
something like
chip-in?
that
Yeah.
to let folks chip in for stuff like that. One of the hot topics this year is having residents participate, donate to the recreation program because it doesn't fully fund itself. And so, letting people on their utility bills or otherwise say, I'd like to give $5 a month to recreation or something like that. So,
Can I throw a harebrained idea out
Yeah.
about that? Most of us played North Ogden recreation baseball.
Doyle Andrews.
Doyle Andrews. And I think a lot of people would buy the old logo North Ogden Rec t-shirts if they were made available and buy them
Oh.
at premium.
In a very large size.
Would you buy one? Mace?
Yeah, if
I
you,
mean, some of those classic ones that you wore.
Great
Yeah.
idea.
So,
Awesome.
yeah, you get a royal blue 3X tall, I'm in.
Pay $30
That's-
for something like that. For
that-
a $10 shirt.
and we've actually, we have talked about selling North Ogden City gear. I mean, most of you got a hoodie.
Yeah.
That you probably still have and wear, and it's super comfortable. And so we've had residents try and buy those things.
Classic North Ogden Recreation
Okay.
logo on hats and shirts, like people buy it like crazy.
Wonder if we've got the old version. we might need
Sure.
to.
I've got some pictures for
Actually,
you.
Doyle's still alive. I bet he's got like 1,000 shirts.
In his garage.
Oh, I'm sure he does, man. That
No,
guy-
that's a good idea. We will pass that on as
I
a,
mean, you get Doyle, put Doyle on a committee to do that. That guy will go with purpose.
excellent.
North Ogden Rec was his purpose in life.
Oh, that's
I
awesome.
can
I,
still smell that.
Oh, I
Anyway,
can
yeah,
still smell that.
yeah,
It
absolutely.
was not good. The football pad area
Yeah.
over there.
The Oaklawn Park area.
I think you're thinking of, we'll consult and say this after the meeting, but I have some visual
All
aids.
right,
for you.
anything else, John?
no, just those items, just so you're aware.
Okay.
Oh, shoot.
Motion to
Oh,
adjourn.
yeah.
Mo-